There is a particular kind of silence a woman learns after 72 years on this earth. It is not the silence of someone who has nothing to say. It is not the silence of someone who is too tired, too old, or too afraid to speak. It is the silence of someone who has been listening, truly listening, for so long that she has learned something most people never figure out. People will always tell you exactly who they are. You just have to be quiet long enough to hear it. My name is Margaret Anne Caldwell. Most people who still remember me call me Maggie. I am 72 years old. I raised 2 sons in a 3-bedroom house in Durham, North Carolina, on a bookkeeper's salary and whatever side work I could find during tax season. I buried my husband Raymond 11 years ago, washed his body, picked his suit, chose the hymns, and sat in the front pew of Greater Emmanuel Baptist with my back straight and my hands folded while 200 people told me how sorry they were. I thanked every single one of them. I drove myself home. I made a pot of coffee. And I sat down at Raymond's desk in the back room, opened the bottom drawer he always kept locked, and began to read. But I'll get to that. For the last 3 years, I have lived in my eldest son Derek's house. Not by choice, though that's what he would tell you. Not because I couldn't manage on my own, though that's what his wife Crystal would say if you asked. And she would say it with such convincing concern in her voice that you would believe her, the way everyone believed her, the way I believed her once. I live in Derek's house because Crystal convinced him, gently, strategically, with the particular sweetness of a woman who knows exactly how to frame generosity as a cage, that it was the right thing to do. That I was getting older. That the house on Birch Street was too much for one woman. That they had plenty of room, and wouldn't it be so much easier if I were close by, where they could keep an eye on me. She said all this at a Sunday dinner 3 years ago, sitting at the head of a table in a house my late husband's insurance money helped them buy. She said it while cutting a roast I had seasoned that morning. She said it with her hand resting lightly on Derek's arm, her French manicure gleaming under the dining room light, her smile wide and warm and aimed directly at me like a floodlight. And I, a woman who spent 41 years reading numbers, tracing discrepancies through ledgers, catching the kinds of errors that hide in plain sight because no one thinks to look twice. I looked at that smile and I did not see what was behind it. Not yet. If this story is already finding its way under your skin, hit that like button and subscribe to Linda's Life Diaries. And drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. She always said the ones who stay quiet longest know the most. Let's see if that's true. Let me tell you about the house. It matters. Every room in this story has a purpose, and some of them hold secrets that took me 3 years to find. Derek and Crystal's home sits on Larkspur Lane in a subdivision called Wyndham Crossing on the outskirts of Raleigh. It is a 4-bedroom, 3.5-bath colonial with a 2-car garage, a finished basement, and a backyard that Crystal redesigned twice in 3 years because she saw something on Pinterest that she decided she couldn't live without. The house cost $420,000. Derek and Crystal put down $105,000. $80,000 of that came from the life insurance payout after Raymond died. Money I gave my son freely, without conditions, because I believe that a mother's job is to make the path smoother for her children, not to pave it with receipts. The remaining $25,000 came from Crystal's parents, Eugene and Dolores Whitfield, who never let a single Sunday dinner pass without reminding everyone at the table exactly how generous they had been. Derek is my firstborn. He is 44 years old, works as a logistics coordinator for a regional shipping company, and has spent his entire adult life being quietly managed by people who are louder than he is. When he was a boy, he was gentle. Almost too gentle, Raymond used to say. The kind of child who would give away his lunch because another kid forgot theirs. The kind of teenager who never argued, never pushed back, never raised his voice. I used to think this was goodness. I have come to understand that it is also vulnerability. Crystal saw that vulnerability the way a locksmith sees a door. She knew exactly which tool to use. They met at a company mixer when Derek was 31. Crystal was 28, newly relocated from Greensboro, working as a marketing coordinator for a skincare brand. She was beautiful, I will give her that, because denying it would be dishonest, and I have spent too much of my life being dishonest about the things I saw clearly but chose to reinterpret. She was polished. She was articulate. She dressed in a way that communicated taste without appearing to try. And she paid attention to Derek, the kind of focused, deliberate attention that a man like Derek, a man who had spent his life being overlooked by women who wanted sharper edges, had never received before. Within a year they were engaged. Within 2 they were married. Within 3 Crystal had redecorated the house, restructured their finances, installed her parents as regular fixtures at every family gathering, and begun the quiet, systematic work of making sure that when Derek thought of family, the image in his mind looked more like hers than mine. I did not fight it. I told myself it was natural. A wife becomes the center. A mother steps back. This is how it's supposed to work. But stepping back and being pushed out are not the same thing. And I was being pushed. It started small. The kind of small that you notice but immediately explain away because the alternative, that your son's wife is deliberately diminishing you, is too painful to sit with. I would call Derek on a Tuesday evening. He wouldn't answer. He'd call back Wednesday afternoon, and somewhere in the first 30 seconds, I'd hear Crystal's voice in the background, not speaking to me, never speaking to me, but speaking near enough that Derek could hear her. A reminder. A timer. A leash. Derek, don't forget we have the Whitfields at 7. The call would end 4 minutes later. He'd say he'd call back on the weekend. Sometimes he did. More often it was Crystal who texted me instead. Hi Mom. Derek swamped this week. We'll try to do brunch soon. Yellow heart. That yellow heart. I came to understand that emoji the way a sailor understands a red sky at morning. It meant, not now, not soon, not unless I decide. Then it was the holidays. Thanksgiving moved to Crystal's parents' house. Just this year, Mom, they have the bigger dining room. Christmas became a split affair, morning with me, the real celebration at the Whitfields, where Crystal's mother Dolores served a glazed ham and made a toast that always, somehow, included a reference to how blessed Derek was to have married into a family that values togetherness. I sat at that table, eating Dolores Whitfield's dry cornbread, watching her toast my son as though she had raised him, and I smiled. I complimented the food. I helped clear the dishes. I drove myself home to a dark house on Birch Street and sat in Raymond's chair and told myself this was just how families worked now. But when Crystal proposed that I move in, when she sat at that Sunday table and pitched it as a kindness, as generosity, as love, something in my chest shifted. Not because I believed her. By then, some part of me had stopped believing Crystal's warmth the way you stop believing a weather forecast that's always wrong. It shifted because I realized that if I said no, I would lose Derek entirely. So I said yes. I sold the house on Birch Street, the house where I had raised my boys, where Raymond had taught Derek to ride a bicycle in the driveway, where I had sat at my husband's desk and opened the locked drawer and found a world I didn't know existed. I sold it because Crystal said it was the smart financial move. I sold it for $265,000. Crystal suggested, and Derek agreed in that quiet, nodding way of his, that the proceeds go into a family investment account that Crystal would manage. I'm good with money, Mom, Crystal said, smiling that fluorescent smile. Let me take care of it. I agreed to put $100,000 into their account. The remaining $165,000, I moved somewhere Crystal never thought to look. But again, I'll get to that. The room they gave me was on the ground floor at the back of the house past the laundry room. It had been the guest room. Before that, it had been Crystal's home gym. You could still see the marks on the carpet where the Peloton had stood. The room was small. Smaller than the closet in the master bedroom upstairs, and it had a single window that looked out onto the back fence and the recycling bins. Crystal had placed a vase of artificial flowers on the nightstand. She had hung a framed print of a sunset that you could buy at HomeGoods for $11. She stood in the doorway as I set my suitcase on the bed, and she said, "We wanted you to feel at home, Mom." I looked at the recycling bins through the window. I looked at the plastic flowers. I looked at Crystal standing in my son's house, in a home my husband's money had helped purchase, wearing a silk robe and a smile that did not reach her eyes. "It's lovely," I said. "Thank you." And I meant part of it. The gratitude was real, not for the room but for the clarity. Because in that moment, standing in a converted gym with a view of the garbage, I understood something I had been circling for years. Crystal did not want me close so she could take care of me. She wanted me close so she could manage me. There is a difference. Caretaking is generous. Management is control. And control, I have learned, always has a purpose. Let me tell you about the daily texture of it. I woke each morning at 5:30, as I have for 50 years. A lifetime of early shifts at the accounting firm, And then Raymond's business had written the schedule into my body like a second heartbeat. I made coffee, a small pot, a single cup, because Crystal had a precise system for her Italian espresso machine, and I was informed gently during my first week that regular drip coffee interfered with the flavor profile of her specialty beans. I kept a small jar of Folgers in my room. I boiled water in an electric kettle I bought at the Dollar General on Route 70 and made my cup in silence, standing by the laundry room window, watching the sky lighten over the subdivision. By 6:30 I had the kitchen clean. Not because anyone asked me to, because if I didn't clean it, Crystal would come downstairs at 7:15 and make a comment. Never a complaint, never a criticism, just a comment about how things pile up so fast in this kitchen, don't they? The comment would be followed by a glance. The glance would find whatever I had left undone. And the silence after the glance was louder than anything she could have said. So I cleaned. I cleaned counters that were already clean. I loaded the dishwasher before anyone dirted a plate. I swept the kitchen floor every morning and mopped it every other day. I wiped down the stove after every meal. I folded laundry that appeared in a basket outside my door without a note. Just the basket, just the expectation. Some weeks I cooked dinner 4 nights out of 5. Not because Crystal asked. Because Derek would come home from work exhausted, and Crystal would still be upstairs on her phone or at the Whitfield's house, and someone had to feed my son. I made pot roast on Mondays, baked chicken on Wednesdays, fried catfish on Fridays, the way Raymond used to love it, the way Derek used to love it before Crystal decided the house was going Mediterranean, and filled the pantry with quinoa and olive tapenade. Derek ate my food with something I recognized, not just hunger but memory. He'd close his eyes on the first bite sometimes, and I'd see the boy he used to be, the one who sat at my table and asked for seconds and told me everything about his day without being asked. He'd look at me, and for a moment the fog Crystal had wrapped around him would thin, and my son was right there. Then Crystal would come downstairs. She'd look at the table. She'd smile. "Oh, Mom, you cooked again? You really don't have to do that. You know we have the meal service." The meal service was a subscription box that delivered pre-portioned ingredients and recipe cards twice a week. It cost $112 a month. Crystal had signed up for it the week I moved in, and she mentioned the price to me exactly once, which was all she needed to do because the message was clear: your cooking is not required. Your presence in this kitchen is a favor we are tolerating. I'd wrap the leftovers, label them, put them in the back of the refrigerator. By morning they'd be gone. Not eaten, gone. I found them once in the trash under a newspaper, as if someone had tried to hide the evidence. I didn't say anything. I made pot roast again the following Monday. There is a rhythm to being made invisible. It happens by degrees, the way the ocean erodes a cliff, not in a single dramatic crash, but through 10,000 small waves, each one pulling away a grain of sand so fine you don't notice the ground is shrinking beneath your feet until the day you look down and realize you're standing on an edge. Crystal controlled the household calendar. She decided when family dinners happened and who was invited. She controlled the shared family group chat, a text thread that included Derek, Crystal, her parents, her sister Charlene, and my younger son Terrence, who lived in Charlotte and visited twice a year when Crystal made room for him on the schedule. I was not in the group chat. I learned this 7 months after moving in, when Terrence called me on a Saturday morning, confused. "Mama, why didn't you come to the cookout last weekend? Crystal said you weren't feeling well." "What cookout?" The silence on the phone told me everything. "Terrence, I wasn't invited to a cookout." He didn't push it. Terrence is like his father. He retreats from conflict the way water retreats from fire. He changes the subject. He asks how I'm sleeping. He tells me he'll visit soon. He means it when he says it. But soon never comes because soon has to be approved by Crystal, and Crystal's calendar is always mysteriously full when Terrence tries to book a weekend. I began keeping a small notebook. A brown leather journal, the kind with an elastic band that holds it shut. I kept it in the zippered pocket of my purse, which I kept in the bottom drawer of my nightstand, beneath a stack of old church bulletins that no one in this house would ever think to move. I wrote down dates. Meals I cooked that were thrown away. Phone calls Derek didn't return. Events I wasn't told about. Comments Crystal made, the specific words, not my interpretation of them, because I am a bookkeeper by training and I know the difference between what happened and what you felt about what happened. The numbers are the numbers. The words are the words. Feelings are for later. April 14th. Crystal told Derek I seemed confused at breakfast. I was not confused. I was reading the newspaper. April 22nd. Not told about Derek's birthday dinner at the Capitol Grill. Found out from photo on Crystal's Instagram. Caption. Family is everything. Yellow heart birthday cake. May 3rd. Crystal's parents stayed the weekend in the guest room upstairs, the large one with the private bathroom. No one told me they were coming. Found out at 7 a.m. when Dolores was in the kitchen using the espresso machine. May 11th. Overheard Crystal on the phone with Charlene. She's fine, she just sits in her room. It's like having a piece of furniture that does laundry. May 11th. I remember the way my hand stopped over the page when I wrote that. I remember the specific weight of the pen between my fingers. I remember the sound of the air conditioner cycling on, and the distant murmur of the television upstairs, and the particular quality of silence that fills a house when everyone in it has decided that one person doesn't count. A piece of furniture that does laundry. I set the pen down. I closed the journal. I fastened the elastic band. I placed it back in the zippered pocket, beneath the church bulletins in the bottom drawer. And then I sat on the edge of my bed, the twin bed in the converted gym with the view of the recycling bins, and I thought about Raymond. Raymond Anne Caldwell was not a loud man. He did not advertise himself. He wore the same 3 rotation of suits to church every Sunday, drove a 10-year-old Buick that he washed by hand every Saturday morning, and spoke with the quiet, measured precision of someone who believed that words cost something and you shouldn't spend them carelessly. He worked as a property inspector for 26 years, and then, during the last 9 years of his life, he did something I knew nothing about. He built. Not with his hands, with his mind, with his savings, with the methodical patience of a man who understood that real wealth is not the kind you show. It's the kind you build in silence, in rooms no one enters, in accounts no one opens, in properties no one connects to your name. When Raymond died of a cardiac arrest at 67, standing in our kitchen on a Tuesday morning, reaching for his coffee, gone before he hit the linoleum, I found the locked drawer. I found the 3 LLCs filed under different names. I found the commercial property on Mineral Spring Road. I found the 8-unit apartment building in East Durham. I found the investment portfolio managed through a trust company in Raleigh that I had never heard of. I found $1,700,000 that my husband had built brick by brick, during the years when I thought we were just getting by. There was a letter too, handwritten in Raymond's careful block print, folded inside a plain white envelope with my name on it. Maggie, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And I'm sorry I didn't tell you while I was here. I should have. But I knew that if the boys found out about this money before they were ready, it would ruin them. Money makes people show you who they really are. I wanted them to show you first. The lawyer's name is Frank Okafor. He's been managing everything. He'll explain the trust, the properties, the accounts. Don't sign anything until you understand it all. You're smarter than anyone gives you credit for, Maggie. Including me. Use this money when you're sure. Not when you're scared. Not when you're angry. When you're sure. All my love, Raymond. That was 11 years ago. I called Frank Okafor the next morning. He was a tall, serious man in his 50s with reading glasses and a leather briefcase that looked like it had been through a war. He sat across from me at the kitchen table on Birch Street and laid out every piece of paper, every account statement, every deed and title and trust document, and he explained it all in plain English because Raymond had told him I would need that. I asked one question. Does anyone else know about this? No one, Frank said. Mr. Caldwell was very specific. No family. No friends. Just me and now you. I gave my son $80,000 from the life insurance. That money was separate. That money was known. I gave it freely because I wanted to. The rest, the properties, the LLCs, the portfolio that Frank had grown to nearly $2 million through conservative reinvestment, I left exactly where Raymond had put it. Hidden. Quiet. Waiting. Because Raymond was right. Money makes people show you who they really are. And Crystal had not finished showing me. The phone call happened on a Thursday in September, 3 years and 2 months after I moved into the room with the recycling bins. I was in the laundry room folding towels. Crystal was in the kitchen, maybe 20 feet away, leaning against the island with her phone pressed to her ear. She didn't know I was there. The dryer had just finished its cycle, And the door between the laundry room and the kitchen was open. Not all the way, just enough that I could hear every word as clearly as if she were speaking into my ear. She was talking to her sister Charlene. "Girl, I've been doing the math," Crystal said. She was using her real voice, not the honeyed performance she wore in front of Derek, not the sugary concern she aimed at me. This was her planning voice. The voice of a woman discussing an acquisition. If we can get Derek to move her into assisted living, and I've already been planting the seeds with Dr. Parsons about the memory concerns, then we free up that back room for my office. I need the space for the new consulting thing. And honestly, Char, the timing is perfect because once she's in a facility, Derek's going to be handling her finances, which means I'll be handling her finances. There's still like 80,000 sitting somewhere from when she sold that house. She's too old to be managing that herself. A pause. Charlene said something I couldn't hear. Crystal laughed. It was a sound I will carry for the rest of my life, light, musical, practiced. The laugh of someone who has mistaken cruelty for cleverness. She won't fight it, Crystal said. She doesn't fight anything. That's the whole point. She's like one of those dogs that just rolls over. Honestly, if she wasn't so useful around the house, I'd have had her out 2 years ago. But now? Derek's promotion is coming, and we need to look like the kind of family that takes care of their elders. The optics are perfect. We move her to Sunrise Meadows, we tell everyone we're doing it out of love, and we get the money, the room, and the narrative. She said narrative. That word. As though my life was a story she was editing. And the best part? Crystal continued, lowering her voice, though not enough. She doesn't even know she's sitting on money. She thinks she's broke, Char. She brings home dollar store hand soap. She clips coupons. She has no idea that old house was worth anything. We just need to get power of attorney, and Derek will sign whatever I put in front of him. He always does. I stood in the laundry room with a white towel pressed against my chest, my hands perfectly still, my breathing perfectly even. 41 years of accounting had taught me how to hold steady when the numbers didn't add up. A lifetime of being underestimated had taught me how to disappear into a room. Crystal didn't know I was there. Crystal didn't know about the $2 million. Crystal didn't know about the commercial property on Mineral Spring Road. The 3-story building with the storefront that her best friend Janine was currently leasing for a boutique called Lux and Bloom, at $900 a month below market rate, because the property manager, who answered to Frank Okafor, who answered to me, had given Janine a deal. Crystal didn't know that the assisted living facility she had just named, Sunrise Meadows, sat on land that my husband's LLC had purchased in 2009. Crystal didn't know any of this, because I had spent 11 years being exactly what Raymond told me to be. Sure. Not scared. Not angry. I folded the towel. I placed it on the stack. I picked up the basket. I walked through the kitchen without looking at Crystal, without breaking stride, without changing my expression. She glanced at me as I passed, the way you glance at a lamp to see if it's still plugged in, and returned to her call. "Anyway, let me go," she said to Charlene. "I need to call Dr. Parsons before 5. I walked to my room. I closed the door. I sat on the edge of the bed. I opened the bottom drawer. I moved the church bulletins. I pulled out the journal. And beneath the journal, in a manila envelope sealed with a clasp, I pulled out a business card. Frank Okafor, ESQ Okafor and Associates Trust and Estate Planning. I turned the card over. On the back, in my own handwriting from 11 years ago, I had written a single sentence. "When you're sure." I picked up my phone. I dialed the number. "Frank," I said. "It's Maggie Caldwell. I think it's time." Frank Okafor answered on the second ring. He always answered on the second ring. Raymond once told me that Frank believed answering on the first ring made you look desperate and answering on the third made you look careless. The second ring was discipline. The second ring was readiness. "Maggie," he said. No surprise in his voice. No warmth beyond what was professional. Frank was not a warm man, and I had never needed him to be. I needed him to be precise. "I've been expecting this call." "Have you?" "Raymond told me you'd call when you were ready. He said it might take a while. He said you'd want to be sure." I looked at the business card in my hand, at the sentence I had written on the back 11 years ago, sitting at a kitchen table in a house I no longer owned, in a life I no longer recognized. "I'm sure, Frank. Tell me what happened." I told him. Not with emotion, with data. The phone call. The specific words Crystal used. The plan to manufacture memory concerns. The plan to secure power of attorney. The plan to move me into a facility and take control of the money she believed I had. The 100,000 she knew about, while remaining entirely ignorant of the rest. Frank listened without interrupting. When I finished, there was a pause. I could hear the scratch of a pen on paper. She mentioned Dr. Parsons, Frank said. Yes. Do you know a Dr. Parsons? Crystal took me to see him 4 months ago. She said it was a routine checkup. He asked me questions about memory, what day it was, who the president was, whether I could count backward from 100 by sevens. I thought it was standard. It wasn't standard, Maggie. That's a cognitive screening. If Crystal has been communicating with him separately, she may be building a medical paper trail. The chill that moved through my body was not fear. It was recognition. The same recognition I used to feel at the accounting firm when I found the decimal that was off, the entry that had been adjusted just slightly enough to look correct, the number that told a story its author did not want anyone to read. Crystal was not just cruel. She was organized. What do I do, Frank? You do what Raymond would have done. You move quietly, you document everything, and you don't let anyone see you coming. The next 3 weeks were the most deliberate of my life. From the outside, nothing changed. I woke at 5:30. I made my Folgers in the laundry room. I cleaned the kitchen. I folded the towels. I cooked the meals that were thrown away. I sat in my room. I clipped my coupons. I was the piece of furniture that did laundry. But underneath the surface, I was doing what I had done for 41 years in accounting. I was auditing. Frank connected me with a private attorney named Gail Saunders, a woman in her early 60s who specialized in elder law and had spent 2 decades prosecuting cases of financial exploitation against senior citizens. Gail was not flashy. She wore reading glasses on a chain and carried a briefcase that looked older than most of her clients. But when she spoke with the kind of authority that comes from having seen every version of this story and knowing exactly how each one ends. We met at a coffee shop in Cary, 20 minutes from the house. I told Derek I was going to a church meeting. Crystal didn't ask where I was going. Crystal never asked where I was going because Crystal did not consider my movements relevant. Mrs. Caldwell, Gail said, stirring her tea without looking up from the notes she was already taking. Tell me about the power of attorney. There isn't one yet. But your daughter-in-law intends to pursue one. She intends to have Derek sign one on my behalf, yes. She believes I won't resist. Gail looked up. Her eyes were sharp behind the reading glasses. Will you? I won't need to resist, Miss Saunders. I intend to make sure it never gets that far. Gail set down her pen. A small, careful smile crossed her face. Not pity. Not surprise. Respect. The respect of a woman who recognized that the person sitting across from her was not a victim. She was a client with a strategy. Tell me about the assets, Gail said. I told her everything. The 3 LLCs. The commercial property on Mineral Spring Road, currently valued at $1.4 million, generating $11,000 a month in rental income from 4 tenants, including Crystal's friend Janine, who paid below market rent for her boutique and had no idea who her landlord actually was. The 8-unit apartment building in East Durham, fully occupied, generating another $9,000 a month. The investment portfolio, conservatively managed, now worth just over $2.1 million. I told her about the $100,000 I had placed in Crystal's so-called family investment account 3 years ago. I told her I had not seen a statement, a report, or a balance update since. Gail wrote it all down. When I finished, she closed her notebook and folded her hands. Mrs. Caldwell, I need to ask you a direct question. What do you want? I had thought about this. I had thought about it every night for 3 weeks, lying in the twin bed in the converted gym, listening to the house settle around me, listening to Crystal's laughter drifting down from the master bedroom, listening to my son's silence. I want 3 things, I said. I want to know what Crystal did with my $100,000. I want my son to see who his wife really is. And I want to walk out of that house on my own 2 feet, owing nothing, needing nothing, with everything I built still mine. Gail nodded. Then we start with the money. The audit took 5 weeks. Frank's forensic accountant, a meticulous young woman named Priya who wore her hair in a tight bun and spoke exclusively in numbers, Trace the $100,000 I had deposited into Crystal's family investment account through a series of transfers that told a story Crystal never intended anyone to read. The money had not been invested. It had not been placed in a savings account. It had not been used for household expenses or family emergencies or any of the responsible, sensible purposes Crystal had promised when she sat at that Sunday dinner table and told me to trust her. The money had been moved, in increments of $3,000, $5,000, $8,000, into a personal checking account in Crystal's name alone. From there, it had been dispersed across a constellation of purchases that painted a portrait so vivid I could see every brushstroke. $31,000 at Nordstrom, Neiman Marcus and Saks Fifth Avenue over 18 months. $14,000 in spa treatments at a resort in Asheville. $8,000 in payments to a cosmetic dermatologist in Raleigh. $12,000 in transfers to Charlene's personal Venmo account. Gifts, loans, favors, the currency of a sisterhood funded by someone else's retirement. $9,000 in restaurant charges at establishments where the average entree cost more than my weekly grocery budget. $6,000 on a birthday trip to Miami that Derek told me was covered by Crystal's bonus. There was no investment account. There had never been an investment account. The family investment was Crystal's wardrobe. Priya laid the spreadsheet on the table at Frank's office. Every transaction was highlighted, dated, and cross-referenced with Crystal's bank statements, which Frank had obtained through a legal channel I did not ask about because I did not need to know. The total was precise. It was always precise. That's the thing about numbers, they do not lie and they do not care about your feelings. $103,412. Crystal had spent $3,400 more than I had given her, which meant she had also been skimming from the household account Derek funded with his salary. I looked at the spreadsheet. I thought about the Dollar General hand soap in my bathroom. I thought about the Folgers in the jar by the laundry window. I thought about the recycling bins outside my window, and the towels I folded every morning, and the meals I cooked that ended up in the trash under a newspaper. I thought about Crystal saying, "She doesn't even know she's sitting on money." I folded the spreadsheet. I placed it in my purse. I drove back to the house on Larkspur Lane. I parked in the driveway. I walked through the front door. Crystal was in the kitchen, arranging flowers she had bought at Whole Foods, $38 for a bouquet that would be dead by Tuesday. "Hey Mom," she said without turning around. "There's leftover pasta in the fridge if you want." "Thank you, Crystal," I said. I went to my room. I sat on the bed. I opened the journal. September 28th. Audit complete. $103,412 misappropriated. Crystal sole signatory. No investment account exists. Frank preparing demand letter. Gail reviewing Elder Financial Exploitation Statute, NCGS Section 14 to 112.2. I closed the journal. Put it away. I sat in the quiet, in the room that smelled like laundry detergent and artificial flowers, and I felt something settle inside me like a stone dropping into deep water. Not anger. Anger had passed weeks ago. Certainty. Let me tell you about my grandson, because he matters more than any number on any spreadsheet. His name is Marcus. He is 14 years old, Derek and Crystal's only child, and he is the reason I stayed as long as I did. Marcus was named after my father, a fact Crystal mentioned at his christening as though she had come up with the idea herself, though I had been the one who suggested it during a phone call she later forgot had happened. He is tall for his age, quiet in the way that Derek was quiet, with Raymond's eyes dark, watchful, always taking in more than he lets on. Marcus is the only person in that house who sees me. Not past me. Not through me. Not as a function to be performed or a problem to be managed. He sees me. When he was small, he would come to my room after dinner and sit on the floor with his back against my bed, and he would tell me about school. Not the edited version children give their parents, but the real version, the one with the confusing parts and the embarrassing parts and the questions he didn't know how to ask anyone else. I would listen. I would answer when I could. I would sit with the silence when I couldn't. As he grew older, the visits became less frequent but no less important. He would knock on my door on a Saturday morning, holding 2 mugs, one of Crystal's espresso for himself, one of my Folgers that he had made without being asked. He would sit on the end of my bed and show me something on his phone, a video, a song, A meme I didn't understand but laughed at anyway because his laughter was the best sound in that house. And sometimes, not often but enough, he would ask me questions that told me he was seeing what I was seeing. Grandma, how come Mom never invites you to the stuff with the Whitfields? Grandma, why did Mom throw away the catfish? It was really good. Grandma, why do you sleep in this room? That last question came on a Wednesday evening in August, 2 weeks before the phone call. Marcus was sitting on the end of my bed, his long legs folded underneath him, his geometry textbook open on his lap but untouched. He was looking around the room, at the small window, at the artificial flowers, at the single dresser that held everything I owned in this house. This was supposed to be temporary, he said. Not a question. A statement. The statement of a boy who was old enough to understand what temporary looked like and what permanent looked like, and who could see that this room was the second thing pretending to be the first. It's fine, baby, I said. I have everything I need. Marcus looked at me. Raymond's eyes. The eyes of a man who could see through walls. No, you don't, Grandma, he said quietly. And you know it. I reached over and squeezed his hand. I didn't say anything. There was nothing to say that wouldn't be either a lie or a truth he was too young to carry. But that night, after Marcus had gone to bed, after the house had fallen into its nightly silence, Crystal upstairs watching something on her iPad, Derek already asleep because exhaustion was the only peace available to him, I opened the journal and wrote a single line. August 14th, Marcus sees. He has always seen. The plan took shape the way Raymond would have built it. Slowly, precisely, without a single unnecessary piece. Frank restructured the trust. The LLCs were reviewed, their documents updated, their ownership confirmed and secured with redundancies that would require 3 separate legal challenges to unwind. The commercial property on Mineral Spring Road was appraised at current market value. The apartment building was inspected and certified. The investment portfolio was consolidated under a new trust document that named me as sole trustee, with Frank Okafor as successor trustee in the event of my incapacity, real incapacity, determined by 2 independent physicians of my choosing, not Crystal's Dr. Parsons. Speaking of Dr. Parsons, Gail made a phone call. She called his office and requested my medical records under the patient access provisions of federal privacy law. When the records arrived, they told a story that made Gail's jaw tighten in a way I had come to recognize as controlled fury. Crystal had called Dr. Parsons 3 times in the 4 months since my visit. Each call was logged in the file. Each call included notes, written in the doctor's hand, summarizing Crystal's concerns about my cognitive decline. The notes referenced incidents that had never happened. A time I had supposedly left the stove on. A time I had allegedly gotten lost driving to the grocery store. A time I had purportedly forgotten Marcus's name. The notes were building toward a recommendation. 1 more call, maybe 2, and Dr. Parsons would have had enough to support a formal cognitive assessment, the kind that could be used in a competency hearing, the kind that could open the door to a guardianship petition. Crystal was not just stealing my money. She was building a case to steal my autonomy. Gail filed a formal complaint with the North Carolina Medical Board against Dr. Parsons for documenting unverified third-party reports as clinical observations. She also retained an independent neuropsychologist, Dr. Arlene Mays, affiliated with Duke University Medical Center, who conducted a comprehensive cognitive evaluation on a Tuesday morning while Crystal believed I was at a Bible study. The results were unambiguous. My cognitive function was intact. My memory was sharp. My executive reasoning was, in Dr. May's words, consistent with a woman of considerable intellectual rigor. I kept the report in the manila envelope, next to Raymond's letter, next to Frank's business card, next to the forensic audit of Crystal's spending. The drawer was getting full. Gail and Frank agreed on the timing. We would move on the first Saturday in November, the weekend of Derek's company awards dinner, an event Crystal had been planning around for months because Derek was expected to receive a promotion to regional director, a promotion that came with a salary increase, a company car, and the kind of visibility that Crystal had been grooming their family image to support. The choice of date was not accidental. Gail explained it plainly. Crystal's entire strategy depends on appearances, Gail said. The devoted wife, the caring daughter-in-law, the family that takes care of their elders. If the truth surfaces during the one weekend when the appearance matters most, she won't be able to spin it. The audience will already be watching. I understood. I had spent 3 years watching Crystal perform for audiences. Now I was going to change what was playing on the screen. But before the dinner, something happened that I did not plan. Something that moved my timeline forward by exactly 1 day. It was a Friday evening, the night before the awards dinner. Crystal was upstairs getting ready for a prep dinner with the Whitfields. A pre-event gathering that I was not invited to and learned about only because Marcus mentioned it while helping me dry the dishes. "You're not going?" he asked, handing me a plate. "I wasn't asked, sweetheart." Marcus set down the dish towel. He looked toward the stairs. I watched his face, 14 years old, caught between the loyalty he felt toward his mother and the injustice he could see with his own eyes. "That's not right, Grandma," he said. "No," I agreed. "It isn't." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that changed everything. "Grandma, I heard Mom on the phone last week. With Aunt Charlene. She was talking about a place called Sunrise Meadows." He paused. His voice was careful, the way you handle something fragile. "She said she was going to move you there after Thanksgiving. She said you wouldn't even know what was happening." The plate in my hand was warm from the water. I set it down gently. I dried my hands on the towel. I looked at my grandson, at Raymond's eyes in a boy's face. And I saw the moment a child understands that one of his parents is capable of something he cannot forgive. "How much did you hear?" I asked. "Enough." His voice cracked. "Grandma, you can't let her do this. You can't." I put my hands on his shoulders. I looked him in the eye. And I said something I had never said to anyone in that house. In 3 years of silence and patience and folded towels and thrown away dinners. "Marcus, listen to me. I'm not going anywhere I don't choose to go. No one is taking anything from me. And tomorrow night, your mother is going to learn something about your grandmother that she should have known a long time ago." Marcus stared at me. I watched the fear in his eyes shift, not disappear but rearrange itself into something else. Something that looked like the beginning of trust. "What are you going to do?" he whispered. I kissed his forehead. "I'm going to show up." The morning of the awards dinner, I did 3 things before anyone else in the house was awake. First, I called Frank Okafor. "Is everything in place?" "Everything. The documents are with Gail. The demand letter is signed. The forensic report is notarized. The property records are certified. The neuropsych evaluation is sealed and ready to be opened by the court if needed. Everything is in place, Maggie." Second, I called my younger son, Terrence, in Charlotte. I had spoken to him twice in the preceding weeks. Real conversations, not the 5-minute check-ins Crystal's schedule allowed. I had told him about the money. I had told him about Crystal. I had told him about the phone call. He had cried. Then he had gotten angry. Then he had gotten quiet the way Raymond used to get quiet before he made a decision. "I'll be there by 4, Terrence said. "I'm bringing Denise and the kids. Crystal can deal with it." Third, I opened my closet. At the back, behind the house dresses and the cardigans Crystal expected me to wear, the uniform of the harmless, diminishing old woman she had cast me as, I pulled out a garment bag I had purchased 3 weeks earlier from a boutique in downtown Raleigh. Not Janine's boutique, though I appreciated the irony. Inside the bag was a midnight blue sheath dress, tailored to my measurements by a woman named Theodora who had looked at me over her glasses and said, "You're going somewhere important." "Yes," I had said. "I'm going home." I laid the dress on the bed. I set the shoes beside it, low-heeled, black, dignified, the kind of shoes a woman wears when she intends to stand for a long time and not falter. I looked at myself in the small mirror above the dresser. The same face I had seen for 72 years. Lined, yes. Tired in places. But clear. Sharp. Present. A piece of furniture that does laundry. I smiled at my reflection. "Not yet, Crystal. But tonight you'll know exactly what kind of furniture you've been living with." The awards dinner was held at the Prestonwood Country Club, a sprawling chandelier-lit establishment on the north side of Raleigh where the carpets were thick and the drinks were $12 and every table was arranged to make the people sitting at it feel important. Crystal had selected Derek's tie. She had chosen his pocket square. She had confirmed the seating chart 3 times with the event coordinator and had requested a table near the front, because visibility was not a detail Crystal left to chance. What Crystal had not done was tell me I was invited. What Crystal had done was tell Derek that morning that I had mentioned feeling tired, and would probably prefer to stay home. Derek, who had been rehearsing his acceptance speech in the bathroom mirror, had nodded and not questioned it. He never questioned Crystal's reports about me. He had been trained not to. 3 years of Crystal narrating my decline had built a version of me in Derek's mind that no longer matched the woman standing in his house, but he didn't look closely enough to see the difference. At 4:15, Terrence's silver Tahoe pulled into the driveway. Crystal was upstairs. Derek was in the garage. Marcus was in his room. No one saw Terrence arrive except me because I was standing at the laundry room window watching. Terrence walked through the front door without knocking. He was wearing a charcoal suit. Denise was beside him, elegant and composed. Their 2 children, 11 and 9, trailed behind, holding gift bags for Marcus. "Mama," Terrence said, wrapping his arms around me. He held on longer than usual. When he pulled back, his eyes were wet. "You ready?" he asked. "I've been ready for 3 years, baby. I was just waiting." At 4:30, I walked into the kitchen, where Crystal was arranging appetizer plates she'd ordered from a caterer for the pre-event gathering at the Whitfields. She was wearing a crimson wrap dress and gold earrings. She looked up when she heard my heels on the tile. She froze. I was not wearing a housecoat. I was not wearing slippers. I was not carrying a basket of laundry. I was standing in her kitchen in a midnight blue sheath dress and black heels, my hair done, my posture straight, and the particular expression of a woman who is done waiting. "Mom," Crystal said. Her voice was light, automatic, already reaching for the performance. "You look wow. Are you going somewhere?" "Yes," I said. "I'm going to the dinner." Flicker. Just a flicker. The tiniest crack in the porcelain. "Oh, the awards dinner? Mom, Derek said you weren't feeling up to it. And I'm not sure we have room at the table. It's already been arranged." "I called the club this morning," I said. "They added 2 seats. One for me. One for my son Terrence, who you'll find in the living room." Crystal's hand stopped mid-reach for the charcuterie board. Her eyes moved from me to the living room doorway, where Terrence was standing in his charcoal suit, his arms folded, his expression neutral and immovable. "Terrence," Crystal said. Her voice had changed. Not much, a quarter-tone shift, the kind only someone who had spent 3 years listening for it would catch. "What a surprise. I didn't know you were coming." "You wouldn't," Terrence said. "Mama invited me." Crystal looked at me. I watched her calculate. I watched the gears turn behind those carefully made-up eyes, the rapid assessment of a woman who was used to controlling every variable, and had just discovered a variable she hadn't accounted for. "Well," Crystal said, recovering with a smile that almost reached her cheekbones. "The more the merrier. Derek will be thrilled." She turned back to the appetizer plates. Her hands were steady. Her smile was fixed. But I had spent 41 years reading numbers that didn't add up. And I could see the first column beginning to shift. The drive to Prestonwood Country Club took 22 minutes. Derek drove. Crystal sat in the passenger seat. I sat in the back behind Derek with Marcus beside me. Terrence and Denise followed in the Tahoe. Crystal had spent the first 5 minutes of the drive performing a masterful recovery. She had kissed Derek on the cheek, told him he looked handsome, and mentioned, casually as though it had just occurred to her, that Mom and Terrence decided to join us last minute. "Isn't that sweet?" She said it in the same tone she used when describing a neighbor's ugly landscaping as bold. Derek had glanced at me in the rearview mirror. I saw the confusion in his face, the brief, flickering recognition that something didn't match. His mother, dressed up, sitting upright, her eyes clear and present, did not look like the woman Crystal had been describing to him for 3 years. She did not look confused. She did not look tired. She did not look like someone who needed to be managed. But the confusion passed. It always passed. Because Derek had been living inside Crystal's version of reality for so long that any evidence contradicting it felt like a glitch, not a correction. He turned back to the road. Marcus reached over and took my hand in the dark back seat. He didn't say anything. He just held on. The country club was bathed in amber light. The parking lot was full of cars that cost more than most people's houses. German sedans, luxury SUVs, the occasional European sports car parked at an angle that suggested its owner wanted you to notice it. Crystal stepped out of the car and immediately began scanning the entrance, cataloging who had arrived, who was watching, and whether anyone important had seen her exit. She hooked her arm through Derek's as they walked toward the entrance. She did not offer me her arm. She did not wait for me to catch up. She walked ahead and I followed the way I had been following for 3 years. Except tonight, the distance between us was not submission. It was positioning. Terrence fell into step beside me. "You good, Mama?" "Better than I've been in years." The ballroom was exactly what Crystal had been preparing for. Round tables draped in white linen, centerpieces of white roses and eucalyptus, a small stage with a podium and a projection screen, and a bar at the far end where men in dark suits were already gathering in clusters, holding drinks they would nurse for 3 hours. The room held approximately 200 people. Derek's colleagues, their spouses, a scattering of senior executives from the corporate office in Charlotte, and one particular guest whose presence Crystal had not anticipated. Gail Saunders was seated at a table near the back, wearing a navy blazer and her reading glasses on their chain, sipping a glass of sparkling water. She had arrived 30 minutes early, introduced herself to the event coordinator as a family friend, and been seated without incident. She carried a leather briefcase that contained every document Frank Okafor and Priya had prepared: the forensic audit, the trust documents, the property records, the neuropsychological evaluation, and the demand letter. I did not look at Gail when I entered the room. She did not look at me. We had agreed on this. The timing was not now. The timing was later. The timing was precise. Crystal led us to the table she had reserved, front and center 6 seats, a small placard with Derek's name printed in gold foil. She had arranged the chairs with intention. Derek at the center, Crystal to his right, Crystal's parents Eugene and Dolores to Derek's left. 2 seats remained. Crystal gestured to them with a smile that strained at the edges. "Mom, Terrence, there's room right here." The 2 seats were at the far curve of the round table, the position furthest from the stage, partially blocked by the centerpiece. The seats where you put people you need present but don't want visible. The seats where you put the furniture. I smiled. "Thank you, Crystal." I sat down. Terrence sat beside me. Marcus, who had been directed to a separate table with the other teenagers, hesitated. He looked at me, then at his mother, then back at me. I gave him the smallest nod, barely a movement, barely a permission, but enough. He went to his table. The Whitfields arrived moments later. Eugene, a retired insurance adjuster with a permanent expression of faint disapproval, shook Derek's hand and ignored me entirely. Dolores, a tall, powdered woman who smelled like department store perfume and spoke exclusively in announcements, leaned over the table and said, loudly enough for the neighboring tables to hear, "Crystal, you look absolutely stunning. This dress. This event. You've really outdone yourself." "It's Derek's night," Crystal replied, squeezing her husband's arm. "I'm just the support team." Dolores beamed. Eugene nodded. Derek looked down at his plate. I watched all of this from behind the centerpiece. I had been watching scenes like this for 3 years. The choreography never changed, Crystal directed. The Whitfields applauded, Derek performed, and I sat at the edge, unseen and unnecessary, providing the silent backdrop against which Crystal's version of family life could be projected. But tonight, the projector was about to malfunction. If this story has found you, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story from Linda's Life Diaries. The best ones are still coming. And the people who watch to the end are exactly the ones who need to hear them. Dinner was served at 7. The salmon was overcooked. The risotto was under-seasoned. Crystal pronounced both divine and complimented the chef twice to the waitstaff, making certain the tables around us could hear her appreciation. Appearances. Always appearances. Every word Crystal spoke in public was a brick in a wall she was building around herself. A wall of charm, of taste, of effortless grace. And she laid each brick with the precision of a mason who knows that the wall is the only thing keeping the world from seeing what's behind it. At 7:45, the presentations began. The regional vice president, a silver-haired man named Clifton Hayes, took the stage and began working through the awards. Top sales team, outstanding project delivery, leadership and innovation. Each award was accompanied by a round of applause, a handshake, and a photograph against the company banner. Derek's award was 4th. When Clifton called his name, Derek Caldwell, promoted to Regional Director of Southeast Operations, the table erupted. Crystal was on her feet first. clapping with the kind of enthusiasm that communicated not pride but ownership. Eugene slapped the table. Dolores dabbed her eyes with a cloth napkin. Derek stood. He buttoned his jacket. He walked to the stage with the careful, measured steps of a man who was not comfortable in the spotlight but understood it was expected of him. He shook Clifton's hand. He accepted the plaque. He turned to the microphone. "Thank you," he said. His voice was quiet, steady. The voice of a man who had never learned to project, because no one in his life had ever asked him to speak louder. "I want to thank my team who do the real work every day. I want to thank my wife, Crystal, who keeps everything running at home." Crystal raised her glass. The table applauded. Derek paused. He looked out over the room. His eyes found the back table, where I was sitting behind the roses and the eucalyptus. And something in his face shifted. Something small, something uncertain. Something that looked like the first question he had asked in years that Crystal hadn't pre-answered. "And I want to thank my mother," he said, "who taught me that the work you do when nobody's watching is the work that matters most." The room applauded politely. It was a standard acknowledgement, the kind of thing people say at podiums because it sounds right. But Crystal's hand, the one holding the wine glass, tightened. Just slightly. Just enough. She hadn't expected him to mention me. She hadn't scripted that line. And in Crystal's world, anything unscripted was a threat. Derek returned to the table. Crystal kissed his cheek and whispered something in his ear. He nodded. He sat down. The next award was called. The moment passed. But I had seen it. That pause. That look. The tiny fracture in the wall Crystal had spent 3 years building around my son. It was almost time. At 8:15 during the dessert course, I excused myself from the table. Crystal didn't notice. She was deep in conversation with the wife of Derek's new supervisor, performing the role of the gracious spouse with the fluency of a woman who had rehearsed every smile. I walked to the back of the ballroom. Gail Saunders was already standing, her briefcase in hand. "Now?" she asked. "Now." We stepped into the hallway outside the ballroom. A quiet, carpeted corridor with oil paintings of fox hunts on the walls and sconces that cast the kind of warm, golden light designed to make wealthy people feel comfortable. It was the kind of hallway where nothing bad was supposed to happen. Crystal would have appreciated the irony. I pulled out my phone. I called Derek. He answered on the first ring. "Mom? Where are you?" "I'm in the hallway outside the ballroom. I need you to come out here, baby. Right now. Just you. Not Crystal." A pause. "Mom, is everything okay?" "No, Derek. It hasn't been okay for a long time. Please come." 30 seconds later, Derek pushed through the ballroom doors. He was still holding his cloth napkin. His face was creased with worry. The default expression of a man who had been conditioned to believe that any disruption was a crisis and every crisis was his fault. He saw Gail first. Then he saw the briefcase. Then he looked at me, and the worry in his face rearranged itself into something else. Not fear. Not anger. Bewilderment. The bewilderment of a man standing at the edge of something he cannot yet see but can feel. The way you feel a storm before the first drop of rain. "Derek," I said, "I need you to sit down." There was a bench in the hallway, upholstered in burgundy velvet. Derek sat. I sat beside him. Gail remained standing, the briefcase on the bench between us like a verdict waiting to be opened. "Mom, what is this? Who is this woman?" "This is Gail Saunders. She's an attorney. She specializes in elder law." "Elder law? Mom, what are you?" "Derek." I put my hand on his. The same hand I had held when he learned to walk. The same hand I had held when Raymond died and we stood together at the grave and he wept so hard I thought his body would come apart. "I need you to listen to me the way you used to listen to me. Before Crystal. Before the house. Before all of it. I need you to hear what I'm about to tell you, and I need you to not defend her until I'm finished." His mouth opened. Then it closed. He looked at Gail. He looked at the briefcase. He looked at me. "Okay, Mom," he said quietly. "I'm listening." Gail opened the briefcase. She removed the first document, the forensic audit, and placed it on Derek's lap. "Mr. Caldwell," Gail said, her voice even and unhurried. 3 years ago, your mother deposited $100,000 into an account your wife described as a family investment account. That account does not exist. The money was transferred into your wife's personal checking account and spent in its entirety on personal purchases. I have the transaction records, the bank statements, and the vendor receipts. Derek stared at the spreadsheet. I watched his eyes move across the columns, the dates, the amounts, the store names, and I watched the blood leave his face the way color leaves the sky at dusk. Not all at once. In stages. No, he said. Crystal set up the account. She showed me the paperwork. She showed you a printout from a template, Gail said. We verified it with the financial institution. No account matching those details was ever opened. Derek's hands were shaking. The spreadsheet rattled against his knee. That's not. There's more, Derek, I said. I was not going to rush this. I was not going to spare him the way Crystal had not spared me. Gail placed the second document beside the first. The medical records from Dr. Parsons. Your wife contacted your mother's physician 3 times over 4 months, Gail continued. During those calls, she reported fabricated incidents of cognitive decline. A stove left on that was never left on. A name forgotten that was never forgotten. She was building a medical basis for a competency hearing. A competency. She was going to seek power of attorney over your mother, Mr. Caldwell, and with it, control of whatever assets she believed your mother possessed. Derek looked at me. The bewilderment was gone. In its place was something raw and terrible, the expression of a man who is watching the floor give way beneath his own living room. Mom, he whispered. Why didn't you tell me? Because you wouldn't have believed me, Derek. She had made sure of that. Every time she told you I was confused, every time she said I wasn't feeling well, every time she answered a question I hadn't been asked, she was building a story about me that made anything I said sound like exactly what she'd predicted. A confused old woman. A piece of furniture. A piece of. She called me that, baby. On the phone with Charlene. She said I was like a piece of furniture that does laundry. Derek's jaw tightened. A muscle in his cheek moved. I saw his father in that face, Raymond, who never raised his voice but who, when he made a decision, made it with the kind of finality that changed the shape of rooms. What else? Derek said. His voice had dropped. Not in volume. In temperature. I looked at Gail. Gail looked at me. Tell him, I said. Gail removed the final set of documents. The trust papers. The LLC filings. The property records. The portfolio statement. Mr. Caldwell, Gail said. Your father, Raymond Caldwell, spent the last 9 years of his life building a portfolio of real estate investments and financial holdings. At the time of his death, those assets were valued at approximately $1.7 million. Under the management of your mother's attorney, Frank Okafor, those assets have grown. Derek looked at the portfolio statement. I watched his eyes find the number at the bottom of the page. I watched him read it and read it again, and then look at me as though I had suddenly become a stranger standing in the body of his mother. $2.1 million, he said. The words came out flat, stripped of inflection, the way words sound when the brain is still catching up to the mouth. Your mother is not broke, Mr. Caldwell, Gail said. She never has been. She has been observing, documenting, and waiting. Your father asked her to wait until she was sure. She is now sure. Derek set down the documents. He stood up. He walked 3 steps down the hallway, stopped, put his hands on the back of his neck, and stood perfectly still. I let him stand. I did not reach for him. I did not comfort him. He needed to feel this. The full weight of what had been done in his house, under his name, by the woman he had trusted to be the architect of their life together. When he turned back, his eyes were red. His voice was a thread. The commercial building on Mineral Spring Road, he said. That's Crystal's friend Janine has a store there. Yes, I said. Janine leases from a property management company that reports to Frank Okafor, who reports to me. Your father bought that building in 2012. I own it. Derek sat down heavily. He looked at the wall. He looked at the fox hunt painting. He looked at nothing. She was going to put you in a home, he said. It was not a question. Yes. And take your money. The money she knew about, yes. The 100,000. She had no idea about the rest. She never thought to look. She never thought I was worth looking into. Derek pressed his palms against his eyes. When he dropped his hands, his face was wet but his jaw was set. The gentle boy was gone. In his place was something I had not seen in my son since the day he stood beside me at his father's grave and told me he would take care of me. "Where is the demand letter?" he asked. Gail handed it to him. He read it. Every word. Every clause. The formal demand for the return of $103,412. The notification of the elder financial exploitation complaint filed with the Wake County District Attorney's Office. The cease and desist regarding any further contact with Dr. Parsons. The notice that all properties, accounts, and trust assets were legally secured, and that any attempt to interfere with them would result in immediate criminal prosecution. Derek folded the letter. He put it in his jacket pocket. He looked at me. "I'm going to give this to her," he said. "Not tonight, baby. Tonight, I just needed you to know the truth." "No, Mom." His voice was quiet but immovable. The voice of a man who had just found the ground beneath his feet for the first time in years. "Tonight. She needs to know that I know. And she needs to know it while she's still smiling." He turned and walked back through the ballroom doors. I watched them close behind him. Gail looked at me. "You raised that one right," she said. "His father raised him," I said. "I just kept him fed. I did not go back into the ballroom. I did not need to see what happened next. Terrence told me later. Marcus told me later. The event coordinator told Gail later, in a phone call that Gail relayed to me with the careful precision of a woman who understands that some stories deserve to be delivered without embellishment. Derek walked back to the table. He sat down. Crystal was mid-sentence, telling Dolores about a vacation she was planning, a Mediterranean cruise, Derek's promotion bonus funding it, a stateroom with a balcony. She paused when Derek sat down. She read his face the way she always did, quickly, efficiently, already preparing the correct response. "Honey, you okay? You look pale." Derek removed the letter from his jacket pocket. He unfolded it. He placed it on the table in front of Crystal, between her wine glass and her dessert plate, and he said 6 words. "Read it. We'll talk at home." Crystal looked at the letter. She looked at Derek. She looked at the letter again. Her hand moved toward it then stopped. She recognized the letterhead, Gail Saunders, attorney at law, elder law and financial exploitation. The color left her face the way air leaves a balloon, not slowly, not gracefully, but in a single silent collapse. She picked up the letter. She read the first paragraph. Her eyes moved to the second paragraph. By the third paragraph, her hands were shaking so badly that the paper rattled against the table, audible enough that Dolores leaned over to look. Crystal set the letter down. She folded it, quickly, with the practiced instinct of a woman who understood that this document, in this room in front of these people, was a detonation. "Derek," she said. Her voice was a whisper. "Not here. We'll talk at home," Derek repeated. He did not raise his voice. He did not make a scene. He picked up his dessert fork, took a bite of the chocolate torte he had not touched, and turned to speak with the colleague on his left as though nothing had happened. Crystal sat perfectly still for the next 45 minutes. She did not speak. She did not smile. She did not perform. For the first time in the 3 years I had known her, the real her, not the version she showed the world, Crystal Caldwell had nothing to say. Dolores asked if she was feeling well. Crystal nodded. Eugene asked if the fish had disagreed with her. Crystal shook her head. Marcus, from his table across the room, watched his mother's face. And then he looked toward the hallway door, where he knew I was standing, and he gave me the smallest, most deliberate nod. The nod of a boy who understood that what he was witnessing was not cruelty. It was correction. I will not tell you every detail of what followed. Some things belong to the family that lived them, and some things are not mine to narrate in full. But I will tell you this. Crystal did not return the money willingly. The demand letter became a legal action. The legal action became a settlement. The settlement was overseen by a judge in Wake County who reviewed the forensic audit, the medical records, the fabricated cognitive reports, and the phone records documenting Crystal's calls to Charlene and Dr. Parsons. The judge used a word I had never heard applied to someone I had lived with: exploitation. Financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. Crystal paid back every dollar. Not from her accounts. Those were frozen within a week of the demand letter. From her parents, Eugene and Dolores Whitfield, who had spent 3 years toasting their daughter's generosity and their son-in-law's good fortune, wrote a check for $103,412 from the retirement account they had spent decades building. They did not attend another Sunday dinner. Dr. Parsons received a formal censure from the North Carolina Medical Board. His practice was placed under review. Crystal's fabricated reports were expunged from my medical file and replaced with Dr. May's neuropsychological evaluation, which confirmed what I had always known and what Crystal had tried to erase, that my mind was my own. Derek filed for divorce. It was not immediate. It was not theatrical. It was the quiet, deliberate decision of a man who had spent weeks reading and rereading the documents his mother had placed in his hands, and who had come to understand that the woman he had married was not the woman he had been living with. The divorce was finalized 7 months later. Crystal took what the court allowed, which was considerably less than what she had taken without permission. She moved to Greensboro, back to the city she had come from, and I have not heard her name spoken in my house since. Derek kept the house on Larkspur Lane. He kept his promotion. He kept his son. And slowly, in the weeks and months that followed, he began to call me again. Not because Crystal had scheduled it, not because someone had reminded him, but because he wanted to. The calls started short. 5 minutes. 10. Then they grew. 20 minutes on a Sunday evening. An hour on a Wednesday night when Marcus was at basketball practice and the house was quiet and Derek needed to hear a voice that wasn't performing. He asked me questions he had not asked in years. About Raymond. About the properties. About the trust. About the years I had spent building something in silence while the world assumed I had nothing. Why didn't Dad ever tell me? He asked one night. Because he wanted to see who you'd become without knowing, I said. And he wanted you to choose the right people with your own eyes, not with his money. Derek was quiet for a long time. I chose wrong, Mom. You chose someone who was good at pretending, baby. That's not the same as choosing wrong. Choosing wrong is knowing the truth and staying anyway. You didn't stay. It has been 8 months since the night at Prestonwood Country Club. I no longer live in the room with the recycling bins. I live in a 3-bedroom cottage in Hillsborough, North Carolina. A quiet town with brick sidewalks and oak trees and a farmer's market on Saturday mornings where I buy tomatoes from a man named Gerald who calls me by name. The cottage is mine. I paid for it with the money Raymond built, managed by Frank Okafor, who still answers on the second ring. The cottage has a garden. I planted it myself. Tomatoes, basil, collard greens, marigolds along the border, because Raymond always said marigolds kept the pests away. There is a front porch with 2 rocking chairs, and on Sunday afternoons I sit in one of them and drink my coffee. Not Folgers anymore, but not Crystal's Italian espresso either. Something in between. Something I chose. Terrence visits once a month. He and Denise drive up from Charlotte with the kids and we sit at my dining room table, my table in my house with food I cooked and no one throws away. And we eat and we laugh and we talk about things that matter. Terrence has started asking me about the properties, about the trust, about the financial structures Raymond built. I am teaching him the way Raymond should have because secrets protected this family once but they nearly destroyed it too. Derek comes every other weekend. He brings Marcus. Sometimes they spend the night in the second bedroom, the one with the queen bed and the window that looks out onto the garden, not the recycling bins. Marcus helps me in the kitchen. He is 15 now, taller than me, with his grandfather's eyes and his father's gentleness and something else. Something sharper, something he earned the night he sat at that back table in a country club ballroom and watched his mother's mask come off. Last Sunday, Marcus was drying the dishes, the same way he used to in the house on Larkspur Lane, towel over his shoulder, standing beside me at the sink. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said something that made me set down the plate I was holding and look at him. Grandma, do you ever feel bad about what happened to Mom? I thought about it. I owed him an honest answer. I feel bad about what your mother did to herself, Marcus. I feel bad that she believed she needed to take from other people to have enough. I feel bad that she never understood that the people she was stealing from would have given her everything she needed if she had just asked. But I do not feel bad about stopping her. And I do not feel bad about the truth. Marcus nodded. He picked up another plate. Grandpa Raymond sounds like he was really smart, he said. He was. But the smartest thing he ever did wasn't building the money. It was trusting me to know when to use it. Marcus smiled. Raymond's smile. The smile of someone who sees everything and says very little and understands that silence is not the same as surrender. There is a particular kind of silence a woman learns after 72 years on this earth. It is not weakness. It is not submission. It is not the silence of someone who has been broken or diminished or forgotten. It is the silence of someone who knows exactly what she is holding, who knows the weight of it, the power of it, the precise moment it needs to be set down on a table in front of the people who assumed she had nothing. Crystal called me a piece of furniture that does laundry. She was wrong. I was the foundation, the floor she walked on, the walls that held the roof over her head, the deed with my family's name on it. And when I decided to stop holding her up, she discovered what every person discovers when they mistake patience for weakness, silence for emptiness, and a quiet woman for a woman with nothing to say. The floor gives way. The walls come down. And the woman they dismissed is the only one left standing. My name is Margaret Anne Caldwell. I am 72 years old. I own 2 commercial properties, an 8-unit apartment building, a portfolio worth $2.1 million, and a cottage in Hillsborough with a garden full of marigolds. And I was never, not for one single day, a piece of furniture. Thank you for staying all the way to the end. The people who finish the whole story are the ones who understand it, and the ones who share it. If this one moved you, the next video on your screen is waiting to do the same. And if you haven't subscribed yet, come back. There's always another woman the world underestimated. And we tell those stories here.